Hello, gremlins! I've made up a lot of fantasy worlds in my lifetime. Most of those worlds were created for a specific character, purpose, story, or game, and have been mostly unchanged since I created them. Some worlds were continually expanded upon for years before eventually being abandoned, and others are still being world-built to this day. Today, I'm going to be sharing 2 early OCs from a fantasy world I've been creating for a few years now, as well as the broad strokes details of the world around them. The details are very likely to change in the future, as this is a world I'm still actively writing and creating in. In the center of the continent, between the Desert Kingdom to the south and the sparsely populated mountains and wilderness to the north, lies the Kingdom of Born. Made up of tangled forests, lush farmland, rocky coastlines, rushing rivers, and grasslands dotted with wildflowers, Born has a large population and many resources. Once, centuries ago, the kingdom was alive with magic, too. Herds of unicorns roamed the grasslands, the Fae intermingled with human affairs, werewolves howled in the forests, and while there were never many vampire clans in Born itself, the vampires in the northern mountains traded art and metalwork with the nobility of Born. And of course, there were dragons, roosting in the mountains, soaring over forests, hunting in the plains. Magic is wild and powerful and difficult to control. The Fae, werewolves, and vampires had their own cultures and rulers, and dragons cannot be controlled by any man, no matter his title. The early kings lived in harmony with magic, but it didn't take long for the kings to want more power, more control over their kingdoms. The Fae sensed this change in attitude and began to withdraw from humans, retreating to the wilderness and the woods. The vampires cut off contact. The dragons, however, were not so lucky. The king offered land, wealth, and even titles to any man who slew a dragon, and within a century, dragons were no more. His grandson turned his attention to werewolves, hunting them down until those that remained stayed hidden on the fringes of society. Trolls, goblins, unicorns, griffins, all were hunted until they kept away from humans in fear. Magic became a thing of legend for most people. A few human witches learned the arts in secret, and scholars close to the king could use magic for his gain, but that was all. The age of magic seemed to come to an end. Then, 100 years ago, a woman found a dragon egg. It was cold and grey and seemed just to be a large smooth stone until her fingers touched the surface. In her hands, the egg grew warm, grey brightening to blue, and she felt life within it. A dragon had never bonded to a human before, but with no other dragons, this woman was the only family he had. Fearing for the life of this newly hatched creature, the woman left her village and became a hermit in the mountains, raising her dragon companion in secret. She did not remain alone for long. The werewolves who lived in small packs in the woods felt the presence of powerful magic and found her. They brought her meat and furs from their hunts, and she became an honorary member of the pack. Away from the expectations of society and the rules of the king, she began to teach herself magic as well, a wild, untamed magic, unlike the magic learned in the cities out of books with strict rules and regulations. Rumors of this wild woman who was learning magic began to spread through the villages. Other humans, who had always felt out of place in their villages and communities, began to also run away to join this growing group of misfits. As the group continued to grow, they gave themselves a name, the Guild of Dragonfire, mirroring the Craftsmen's Guild from towns and cities of Born. Soon they protected not just one young dragon, but several, as more abandoned eggs were found and hatched in safety. Over the years, the group's purpose changed. They were not just protecting these young dragons, they were quietly fighting for the rights and happiness of all magical creatures and misfits of the kingdom. The guild moved from haphazard camps in the woods to restoring old keeps in the northern wilderness and creating towns and communities where families could be raised. They went from a group rumored to exist to a society talked about in hushed voices that the king could no longer ignore. In the last century, the guild has rebelled against the crown in quiet ways. They have found eggs in the wilderness and raised those dragons, and even tracked down eggs that have been kept as status symbols by Born nobles. They have given homes and belonging and medical care to werewolves, and even become allies with some of the Fae. They have taken in queer, disabled, and otherwise outcast humans who come to them for shelter and family. But no amount of quiet rebellion and community care will tear down the system making magical creatures outcasts in the first place. And now, rumors are spreading from contacts within the capital city that the prince and heir may in fact be a trans girl who is in terrible danger if her father ever finds out. The time has come for the magical, the misfit, and the angry to rise up against the crown and tear down the dynasty of kings who tried to wipe them out. This is the basic world building I've created for the Guild of Dragonfire and the Kingdom of Born. The world building started as a fantasy escapist daydream where I pretended I was part of a castle of people who were bringing dragons back from extinction. Since then, I've added other oppressed fantasy races, a backstory as to why they're oppressed, and an entire rebellion to change the system. I have a lot of OCs in this world, from a character raised to be an assassin for the king who escaped their cult and now uses their skills to help the guild, to a pair of village boys, one of whom was trans and needed magical medical help after a horrible attempt at DIY top surgery, to an ex-guard for the king who became a werewolf due to a magical artifact the king was going to use to get rid of political prisoners. Depending on how the stories I'm writing in this world go, I might share these characters with you later. However, for now I'm focusing on the original character I made this world for, my self-insert, Rowan, and also their girlfriend Raya. I've drawn these two characters in a fighting stance, not yet actively engaged in combat, but in a position where there are enemies nearby who need to be fended off. Rowan is on the right, slightly shorter than Raya, and holding a sword out in front of her. Raya is holding a weapon of her own, a knife, close to her chest ready to defend herself, her partner, and the dragon egg in the bag over her shoulder. The pair's free hands are clasped tight together so they can fight back to back and stay connected, knowing the other is alright. Both characters subvert the gender norms of the kingdom in the way they dress and present, as is common for most members of the guild. Rowan's long hair is shaved at the side, and they are wearing men's clothing. Raya, meanwhile, while wearing a blouse and stays, is also in pants for ease of fighting. Rowan is dressed in greens and browns, while Raya wears a pair of blue stays over a white blouse. Earlier in the drawing process, I'd given Raya a yellow color palette by accident, mixing her up with a different OC from this world named Alyssa. However, in the art I've created previously of Raya, she's always in blue, so I fixed the mix-up to keep her design consistent. While I gave both characters some backstory, Rowan's backstory is definitely more fleshed out, since they were my self-insert. Rowan is her chosen name, a name they chose after joining the guild. Her father owned an inn in a small farming village not too far from the wilderness where one of the guild castles stood. As such, it wasn't uncommon for members of the guild to stay in the inn on their way to other places on missions. Rowan was always fascinated by these adventurers, who had colourful clothing, tattoos, half-shaved heads, and fantastical stories. Rowan themself worked in the inn as a child, and was expected to grow up, marry, and raise a family, like her older siblings. Instead, Rowan ran away from home as a teenager. 3 nights before she ran away, Rowan had a conversation with the guild member in a corner of the tavern. Rowan had asked to come with the small adventuring parties when they left the next morning, and was told that the villagers would accuse the adventurers of kidnapping her. They were already always watched with suspicion, due to their odd appearance and the fact that several of them were women in men's clothing, and it wouldn't take much for the villagers to become hostile. Instead, Rowan and this woman came up with a plan. 3 nights after the adventurers left, Rowan snuck out of her home with a knapsack full of food and a spare shirt, and followed the markers the guild member had left into the wilderness. It took her 2 days of walking to reach the castle. In the castle, Rowan met Raya, who was a year older than her at 15. Raya had darker skin, her father having been born in the southern kingdom of Ashrai, and she had a tattoo of a dragon on her arm, a tattoo similar to one Rowan would later receive as well. Raya was raised in the guild castle, and both her parents were members of the rebellion. Raya taught Rowan how to fight with a sword, with daggers, with a bow, and with her hands and feet. It didn't take long for them to become friends. Raya wasn't the only teenage member of the guild, but Rowan found himself closer to her than any of the others. Raya and Rowan became more than just friends on Rowan's first mission with the guild. It was supposed to be an easy mission, just information gathering to determine the location of a dragon egg that Gil knew was in the possession of someone, but didn't know who. Unfortunately, the mission quickly got out of hand. The nobleman who had owned the egg for several generations was in debt, and sold the egg to a very wealthy merchant in Ashrai. The egg was being smuggled through riverboats and trade caravans to the southern kingdom, and although it was possible for a guild member to recover an egg from Ashrai, it would be much more difficult and dangerous than recovering an egg still inborn. Without time to call for backup, Raya, Rowan, and another member of the guild named Void were suddenly trying to steal the egg from smugglers along the riverbank. While they managed to recover the egg, Rowan got badly wounded from a smuggler's knife. Void held the smugglers off while Raya, carrying a bleeding Rowan and the dragon egg in her arms, ran away. The group made it out of town and ended up camping in the nearby woods. Raya tended to Rowan's wounds and ended up keeping watch all night to make sure Rowan was okay. In the early hours of the morning, Raya finally fell asleep, holding Rowan's hand. The next day, Raya carried Rowan again, although more gently this time, to a village where they stayed for several weeks. Void took the dragon egg and went on ahead and alone to the guild, while Raya stayed with Rowan. In that time, Rowan and Raya spent a lot of time together, while Rowan was bedridden with a healing scar on her side. Raya would hold her hand during the night when Rowan was in too much pain to sleep. Raya told stories about her childhood in the guild, and Rowan talked about life in her village. They talked about the future, about magic, about the guild and the king. Rowan realized then that she was in love with Raya during those couple of weeks. Back in the guild castle, Rowan confessed to Raya under the stars on the battlements, and they kissed in the moonlight, promising each other that this was forever. The two continued to work together on nearly every mission, as well as spending their time together during training and free time. The egg the trio rescued hatched safe and healthy a few months after being recovered. As is the custom in the guild, Rowan then received a tattoo of that dragon on their arm. Every guild member who successfully rescues a dragon egg or hatchling gets a tattoo of the first dragon they rescue. Raya had received her tattoo a few months before Rowan joined the guild. While their dragons are different, they both got the tattoo on the same location, on their upper arms. The drawing of Rowan and Raya went fairly smoothly, but I could not decide on the background setting for this image. I ended up sketching 2 very rough versions of possible backgrounds and asking Instagram for help deciding, and my followers decided on the forest, which I think was the correct choice. Also, if you don't follow me on Instagram, I took a break from posting my art there for a couple months, but I'm back, and currently posting daily as I work through the backlog of art I hadn't yet posted. If you want to see my finished artwork and get a chance to vote when I randomly need help deciding between art choices, follow me at It's Green the Gremlin. Back to the drawing. I haven't been talking much about the actual process of drawing this art, since there is so much to talk about the world instead. I like the design of Raya a bit better than Rowan's design in this piece. I think her pose and facial expression just worked better. However, both characters look fierce and dynamic and cool in my opinion, as I wanted them to. The pair were walking through the woods, already on guard since they are in possession of an egg and very close to the capital city, where hundreds of the king's guards are on the lookout for any members of the rebellion. The woods are especially dangerous since any number of people loyal to the king could be hiding in the foliage, ready to attack Rowan and Raya and destroy or possess the egg. The whole time the pair are traveling through the woods, they would have had their weapons in hand, but at this moment, a sound of footsteps have them readying for a fight. Both characters are very good in a fight. Raya was learning to use a knife since she could walk, and while Rowan started learning much later, they are very dedicated and learned quickly. I think I'm getting better at drawing forest backgrounds. I think they are definitely more detailed than I used to draw, with different varieties of trees and plants disappearing into the dark distance. I also added a layer on top of both the forest and the characters, to add some dappled light from the sun through the leaves, as well as darker shadows. I hope I didn't make the art too dark for YouTube's compression. I've had issues with that in the past. I definitely have a tendency to make things darker than they need to be. I hope you enjoyed this drawing. It was definitely more of an info dump about world building than I intended when I started working on this video, but if this world interests you, let me know. Whenever I want to write but not work on any of my big writing projects, I tend to write short stories set in the Kingdom of Born. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a lot more OCs with various tragic and intense backstories that I'd love to share. I love talking about the random imaginary worlds and people I've created. Until next time, bye!